So now we are finished with basics of transmitter, receiver, and then we discuss some of the technologies such as the RDM. That's the only technology example that we took, but it's the most famous example that you can find in new products, okay? Whether indoor or outdoor products. Now, there are two parts of the transmitter and the counterpart in the receiver that we will not discuss. There is the source coding stage, where we try to compress or reduce the redundancy in our data, which is very important in terms of efficiency of communication. Nobody wants to send things that are useless, because this way you are wasting power, you are wasting bandwidth, you are wasting time, right? Because you are sending something which is not useful, okay? And the other part is the channel coding, which has to do with reducing the errors over your communication channel. So basically, adding some controlled redundancy such that your data is reliably delivered to the receiver side. Okay? Now the topic of communication that really studies in deep or in depth the concepts behind source coding and channel coding is called information theory. Okay? And information theory, if you look at a communication system, information theory studies. Okay, if you look at a digital communication system, for example, okay, so we have the source, right? We have the channel, okay, and we have our destination, right? Okay, and our objective is to communicate some data from the source to the destination through the channel, right? Now, the nice thing about information theory is that it tells you that, number one, if you want to communicate efficiently, which means you don't want to lose resources for communicating something that's not necessary, then you need to do source coding, right? So we need to do some source coding. This is source code. Okay. And of course, at the receiver, you reverse the operation, right? And then to communicate reliably, you need to do some channel coding, and at the receiver you also reverse the operation. Okay, so channel coding. Okay. The nice thing about information theory is that it tells you if you want or if you can design optimally your source coding, which means that it gets you the minimum possible amount of information, and if you can design your channel coding optimally, which means that it can allow you to reach the maximum possible transmission rate over this channel, then in this case you can do these designs separately. This is called the concept of separation. Okay? So you can actually design the source coding only dependent on information about the source. It's independent totally from which channel you are going to use for communication. And you can design your channel coding such that it allows you to get the maximum possible transmission over a particular channel, regardless what your source looks like. Okay, so independent of how the source looks like, you can design the channel coding. It only depends on which channel you will use for communication. Similarly, independent of which channel you use for communication, you can design the source coding such that it optimizes the data from this particular source, and it depends only on the source characteristics. It has nothing to do with the channel characteristics. Okay? And this is called the concept of separation. Okay. So, without going into the details of communication or information theory, just this is worth mentioning that when we are doing source coding, we only look at characteristics of the source. When we are doing channel coding, we only look at characteristics of our communication channel. We don't care about which source in this case, and we don't care about which channel in the case of source coding. So let's start by the source coding situation. So we lost. Okay. This just says what we have been doing last time. This is what we will do today. So we will talk about data compression, the concept of compressing your data, the concept of reducing the amount of redundant information in your data. Ultimately, you want to make the redundant information equal to zero, right? Redundant means it's unnecessary. It's not providing any extra information, right? So you want to remove it. Then we are going to talk about two ways that you can encode your data, okay? such that you reduce its size or perform compression. One of them is fixed and the other one is variable length coding. Then we are going to describe what's the limit, how do you know what's the minimum amount of information you need to send about your source such that you don't lose any piece of information. You need to know that limit such that when you are designing a source encoder, you know what's your minimum limit. Once you reach it, you know exactly that. You cannot do better than that, right? So this is kind of, no, channel capacity has to do with channel, okay? Channel capacity has nothing to do with source coding, because that's a channel characteristic, right? So you need to know exactly what's the minimum amount of information that you need in order to represent your data, right? And that measure is called the entropy, okay? It's a measure of the information coming from a particular source. Then we will discuss an encoding, an ingenious encoding method called the Huffman coding, which allows you, in many cases, to almost approach the entropy, but not in all cases, okay? And Huffman coding is a variable length code, okay? And by this, we'll finish the lecture for today, okay? So it should be a very short lecture, not very much, except if you ask too many questions. Okay, so I was saying that this is our, I don't want this to happen again. So I was saying that this is our communication system, so we have the transmitter and the receiver. The transmitter has the source, right? And then the formatter, this is the part where you do your sampling, quantization, blah, 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 right? And then after that, you convert this into a digital data. Then you start doing source encoding, where you reduce all the redundancy, if possible, remove all of it, right? Then, if you want to send reliably, you start doing channel encoding, and then after that, modulate, put on the carrier, send over the channel, right? Receiver side, you reverse the operation. So you demodulate the data that you have sent over the channel. So you down convert, demodulate, then you perform channel decoding, and then source decoding so that you recover the original format of data, and then you put it through the deformat. So this is a formatter which inverses what the other formatters do, right? And this is a very nice block diagram because it summarizes it at different levels. So this is like a kind of a detailed level. This is the high level: source, transmitter, channel, receiver, user, right? So this figure is very fair. Okay. So our objective from source encoding is to perform data compression. Okay. So what's the meaning of data compression? Simply, you want to change the format of your data such that you reduce the size. The objective of any compression is to reduce the size. Okay. So you transform the data into a more compact form. Right? You change how it looks like such that you reduce the size. Why do you want to do that? If you want to store this data, then you are saving on storage. If you want to send this data, you are saving time, frequency, power, energy, all these things, right? So this is something desired, generally speaking. Now, here is an example of, like a quick intuitive example, how you can do data compression. Assume that you are representing your characters, the alphabets of the English language, for example, using the ASCII code. So each one of those characters is going to be represented by 1 byte. Okay? And now assume that you want to send 100A. So A 100 times, right? If you send it by its normal format, each one is represented by a byte, you need 100 bytes, right? But then if you can think of something smart, which is going to be like your compression method, then you would say, okay, I'm going to use a technique that maps these 100 A's, which are consecutive one after the other, into an ASCII that says 100 and then A. Okay? So the receiver would immediately know that this should be mapped back into A 100 times, right? So if you do that mapping, how much data you need to send this information? You need 1, 2, 3, 4 ASCII characters, so 4 bytes only, right? While if you send it in the plain format, you would have needed 100 bytes, right? So by doing this mapping from the A into 100A, you have compressed your data. Given that, your receiver would be able to recover it again, right? So this is an example of how you can do compression, right? I don't want anyone to take this as this is what the zip file do or what, right? This is just a very trivial example of compression, right? The actual compressions are much more complicated than this, okay? And that example that we have just seen is an example of lossless compression, right? Because I was able to recover exactly my original data. I didn't lose any piece of information when I map the A's written 100 times after each other into 100 A, given that the destination can understand and decode that format, right? So I didn't lose any piece of information. Now, examples of technologies that uses lossless compression are the zip, whether you talk about WinZip, gzip, the compress, the bzip, the GIF for image formats, right? While there are other ways to do compression, which when you compress your data, you can no longer recover it exactly. You can recover it with a little bit of error, a little bit of distortion, right? And these are called compression, lossy compression. Okay? Example of that is JPEG. So everyone is aware of that. And what's in video? You can expect, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. MPEG. Yeah. So examples of lossy compressions are the JPEG and the MPEG formats, right? Now the idea here is, even though you lose some of the information, but it doesn't matter that much to the user, right? Because the eye anyways cannot figure out the difference. So if that's the case, it's fine. Okay? But let me give you an example where you cannot do this. Okay? Imagine that you are dealing with medical images, which are used for diagnosis. Do you think you can do any lossy compression in these?
No, you use the
Yeah. Why?
Because details matter. Details matter.
Matters to who?
to the doctors.
So the eye is different from any human eye?
They don't use the eye, they use microscope, something like to zoom in.
They zoom a lot.
Yeah, so one thing is that they zoom a lot, but assume that you also take that into account.
Sometimes compression involves interpolation of the colors.
Digital image processing.
So that's another issue that you can do, like automated processing, but imagine that also can be handled in automated. This is another meaning thing. So all these are valid reasons. But
Some methods employ interpolation by cubic interpolation on nearest neighborhood of these methods.
yeah.
So, for example, if we compress a number of bits and then we want to decompress them, if we do interpolation, some maybe the color itself of the image.
Yeah, so basically, whether this is going to affect the naked eye or the processing, right? But there is one more issue.
The judge of the doctor, like, is based, like, it's not on off. There is, like, worst case in between.
That's still within the fact that it's a human being. And
So the scanning does the content change? Does the content?
well, the content will change, but I'm saying that it's irrelevant. The eye of the doctor cannot really recover.
We don't need, we can afford to not compress it.
Let me stop it here. Okay. So I think you wouldn't think that much because here in our countries here we are not really fully aware of
Legal
this.
issues?
Yes. So basically, doctors are very susceptible to legal situations, right? Now, if in a legal situation you can prove that the image has been altered, even though it's not going to be affecting the doctor's judgment, right? It's a big issue. It should not be altered from the original image. This is how it's taken, it should stay the same, regardless of anything, right? So the legal issues are a very critical issue as well. So that's why compression in the case of diagnostic medical imaging cannot, I'm saying diagnostic because, for example, I can take my face picture because they want to recognize me, right? For my medical record, but this is not diagnostic. But things that are used for diagnosis, you cannot really perform any lossy compression on them. They have to stay similar to the way they were taken originally, okay? I'm not saying that they are with infinite precision, but it's well accepted within the legal system that this is the precision that exists in our life. We don't have a very precise system. But there should not be any loss or alteration of those images in the subsequent stages of your system, right? So yeah, the original system is not going to be perfect anyway. Any camera is not perfect. Any X-ray system is not perfect. That's understandable, and we cannot do better than that as human, right? So anyways, now in order to do the mapping from the original format of your data into a compressed format, or that what we called in a couple of slides ago, the transform from the non-compact to the compact format, okay, we need to understand some general concepts of the system of coding. Okay. So typically, the system of coding is composed of a set, okay, which is called the set of possible code words. Okay? Each element inside that set, and sometimes they call it the code book. Not sometimes, in many times, code book. Okay? So these are the set of possible code words that eventually you will produce. Okay? So each one of those is called a code word, right? It's a set of code words, so each element is a code word, right? We have also the alphabet, right? The alphabet is the symbols that are coming from your source. So your source is producing, let me put them in different colors. So your source is producing set of symbols. You can call them the alphabets. Okay. So these are symbols. Uncoded symbols, right? Alphabets. And we have a mapping techniques that tells me somehow from a particular alphabet there is a particular code word that's going to be generated, right? And this is the transformation that we do in order to compress in the case of source coding. The same transformation we do it but with different function, different transformation function in case of channel coding. I have a symbol, I want to send it encoded using a channel encoder, so I have to map it into one of possible code words for that channel encoder. So same operation happens for source coding or channel coding, but the function that does the mapping and the output code words are different because the objective is different. Here the objective is to reduce the redundancy, to compress, right? In the channel coding, the objective is to control the errors over the channel, right? So they have two different objectives. So let's focus on the case of source coding. I'm going to map every symbol, every alphabet that I have into one of n possible codes, right? Such that the objective of this mapping is that I reduce the size of the resulting transmitted data. Okay? I want to reduce the size of that because this is the objective of source code, right? Now I can do this mapping assuming that those code words are with fixed length. So in this case I'm using fixed length coding. So each one of them, for example, is 10 bits in size. Okay? Or it can be that those code words are, one of them is like 1 bit, the other one is 3 bits, the other one is 5 bits, and so on. And I will choose one alphabet to assign it to the one with only 1 bit. I will choose another alphabet to be assigned to the one with 5 bits, and so on. Right? The important thing is that this assignment should be unique. So every single alphabet has to be assigned a unique code word. Otherwise, you will not be able to decode at that receiver side, right? So for lossless compression, the assignment has to be unique. Each alphabet, each different alphabet, has to be assigned one different code word, right? And those code words, if they are fixed in their length, then I'm using fixed length coding. If they are variable in their length, then I'm using variable length coding. Okay? Question for you. Ask me a question.
This uniqueness from the two other ways is the hash function, what you call hash functions, or it's
Hash functions are used for encryption. This is not encryption.
but like same working.
Yeah, a hash function has to do unique assignment from one thing to the other thing, right? But what we use for source coding is not a hash function. Does not have the other properties of hash function. Okay? So we are doing a map. Okay?
اتوقع قاعد نفس الكيبورد لما تضغط اي تحط البت مثلا
لما
نفس مثلا الكيبورد شلون يحولها
لا هو الاسكي يعني الاسكي. So for example ال A takes مش عارف 65 وال B takes مش عارف 68 وهكذا. These are called the ones that are the 65 or 68 والكلام ده. These are the code words and my alphabets are the A, B, C, and so on. So ASCII is one form of mapping or encoding things into something else, symbols into code words. تمام? Let's focus on the question of, okay, I wanted to ask you a question, okay? The objective is to reduce the amount of data that you need to send, right? Given that you still convey exactly the same amount of information. So think of the word information as the unique features that you need to transmit about the source, okay? So your voice should include information that's sufficient for the receiver to figure out the word and the voice tone that you are spoken with, right? Such that it's reproduced again exactly the same, right? So now the amount of data that you can send, right, can be redundant. For example, your voice you need to sample. That's a very trivial example. You need to sample, for example, at like 6 kilohertz or 10 kilohertz, but you decide to sample at 88 kilohertz, right? So you have more redundant samples, right? You want to guarantee quality, you want to do whatever, but the minimum amount of information that you need to send is actually 66 kilo samples per second. That's the minimum, right? Below that, you will lose some information, okay? So that's the difference between amount of data as compared to amount of information. You might send a lot of data, but it conveys only a small amount of information, so you need to reduce that extra redundant part, okay? Now, that's the objective. Assume that I'm using fixed length code, okay? And let's look at what will we achieve in this case. So if I use fixed length coding, and assume that the number of my alphabets is 64 alphabets, okay? So how many bits I need to use? I'm using fixed length encoding. How many bits I need to use in the code words such that I can represent every single alphabet with a unique code word? I have, look at the question. I have 64, I have a set of 64 alphabets. Okay? Basically symbols, okay? Okay. And I'm using fixed length coding. Okay? And my objective, reduce the amount of data. That's the objective of source coding, right? Okay? So, how many bits I need for each code word? Okay? To uniquely encode the source. Yeah, of course, because I need how many code words? I need 64 code words because I have 64 different symbols from the source, right? So each one of them should correspond to a unique code word. So how many code words? 64. This means that the code word, since they are all equal length, then this means that the code word has to be 6 bits, right? 2 to the power 6 will give you 64. 2 to the power 6, right? So I need 6 bits for each code word, صح? And in this case, ايه المشكلة? Okay. And in this case, okay, if I assume that the source has equally likely probabilities. So if I have the probability of sending the first symbol is equal to the probability of sending the second symbol, equal to the probability of sending the third symbol, and so on. What's going to be the average? The average number of bits that you need to send per code word or per symbol. هيبقى كام؟ 6, right? Because they are equally probable, and I'm sending for any one of them 6. So the average is going to be equal to 6. And if they are not equally probable, the average is also going to be 6 because they are all equal length. صح؟ فهقول الاولانيه في البروبابيلتي بتاعتها اللي هي 6 في البروبابيلتي زائد الثانيه في البروبابيلتي هي 6 في البروبابيلتي الثانيه. هتطلع لي في الاخر 6 في مجموع probabilities اللي هي 6 صح؟ That's how you will get the average number of bits per symbol تمام؟ So in this case for the fixed length the minimum I can do is if I want to put it in an equation it's log to the base 2 of n مظبوط where n is the number of unique symbols right ceiling function okay so that's the average bits per symbol that I will do for fixed length coding تمام now assume that I'm given a little bit more and I can assign variable length codes to the different symbols. Okay? For the case of equally probable, what can you do? Can you do better than the 6?
Variable length and
If for example, if we have one of the symbols 1 and then a lot of zeros, instead of sending those 7 zeros, 5 zeros, I can send, for example, 2 bits that corresponds that whatever number of bits that we have before, with more than 3, for example.
exactly. So I can
say like this and then rest complete zeros.
First symbol with 1 bit, second.
So I can, yeah, exactly. So I can do, right? I can actually do even better than this. So I can say, okay, first 2 symbols are going to be represented by 1 bit. If the bit is 0, I'm sending the first one. If the bit is 1, I'm sending the second one, right? Then I'm going to use 2 bits, right? So if I use 2 bits, I'm going to cover 4 more symbols, right? Correct? Where the first one is going to be 0, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, 1, right? Correct? And then I'm going to cover with 3 bits the next 8 symbols, right? And so on, until I cover the 64. What's going to be the average code length in this case? طبعا we cannot find a direct formula unless we figure out how many we will use. تمام? However, it's going to be, generally speaking, less than the amount or the average number of bits per symbol that you did for fixed length, right? Okay. So basically, using variable length allows you to reduce the average number of bits per symbol that you can use, right? Now, in the case that the source symbols are not equally probable, what's the smart way to do this? Exactly. So in order to reduce the average, you pick the ones with very high probability. For example, in the alphabets, the letter A is the most repeated letter in the alphabets. It has like a higher probability than any other in all the words, right? So A in Morse code is given the shortest. You know Morse code, right? The one used for telegrams, right? That's the old one. So the A is given like a dot dash, right? Then you go to something like the letter W, which is the least, or the X or the Z. These ones are very low usage. You will find that it is dot dash, dot dash dash. Long one, right? Why? Because this one is used the least, so it's left until the end, and then you give it the shortest available when you reach that letter, right? Because it's the one that's repeated the least. So if it's longer, it's not going to affect the average that much. While the one that's repeated the most, you make it shorter such that the average becomes smaller. Okay? So basically, the intuition is if the source words or symbols are with different probabilities, using variable length, the intuition is going to be the one with the highest probability is going to take the shortest code. And then next one is going to take the little bit longer and so on. So it's inversely proportional to the probability of occurrence. Such that your eventual objective is to reduce the overall average number of bits per symbol, right? So you are looking at the average. And by doing that reduction, you have achieved the objective of source coding. You need to reduce the redundancy in your data, right? So this slide is all about the case of fixed length. We have already covered that case, so no need to discuss it again. And this one shows you, just a minute, this one shows you the case of variable length. So for example, if letter A is repeated 46 times, letter B is repeated 13 times, C is 12 times, D is 16 times, E is 8 times, and F is 5 times. This is some kind of statistics that are given to you in a certain alphabet. Then, if we are allowed to allocate variable length, I will choose the shortest, for example 0 for this one, 1, 0, 1 for this one, so 3, 3 for this one as well, 3 for this one as well. I will move to 4 for this one, and I will move to 4 for this one. These are the least probable ones, they have the longest. These are medium, so they have the medium size. This is the most repeated, it has the shortest possible. Now, why the 0, right? And not, for example, the 0, the 1 here, and then 1, 1, 1, 0, and so on. There are other things that you have to take into account when you are doing variable length. So it's not only that you choose the shortest for the most probable, but you also have to make sure that each code word is instantaneously decodable. What's the meaning of instantaneously decodable? If I assume that I have a sequence A, C, E, so what will I receive? 0, right? 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, right? Okay. Now, can I have this same sequence for any other sequence of letters? Look at this. Can I have, so let's look at A, C, E that I just mentioned. So A, C, E will have 0, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 0, 1, right? All of this gonna be coming to you as a receiver, right? Okay. Can you figure out any combination of other letters that's gonna give me something similar?
B could come in the end.
Okay, if B comes in the end, what will happen?
There's no one.
So?
There's no.
The last 101 can become a B.
The last ماشي
101 can become a B. Then 1001, that's before it.
That's nothing.
Doctor, you should look from this direction. You cannot look from this direction.
Look from any direction.
ما فيها AC.
Look from any direction. You cannot decode these into any other thing other than ACE. Try it the way you like. Look from here, start in the middle, do whatever you like, okay? You cannot decode this no matter how you take parts of anything, right? You cannot decode this into anything other than ACE. What's the property that guarantees that this is going to happen? The property that guarantees that this is going to happen are two things, or two properties, okay? Number one, each code word is assigned a unique code, okay? And each symbol is assigned a unique code word. And the other important property, which is specifically for this situation, no code word is a prefix of the other code word. So for example, I cannot have among the code words here 1, 0. Why? Because 1, 0 is a prefix of this, right? So I cannot have a 1, 0 in any one of these. Otherwise, that 1, 0 could be confused as a prefix to the B. So when I have 1, 0, 1, I'm confused. Should I decode this as 1, 0, 1, which is B, or should I decode the 1, 0 as the other letter and then take this one with something else, right? So no code word can be the prefix of any other code word, okay? This guarantees not only that you will be able to uniquely decode any sequence, but it also guarantees the instantaneous decoding. So you can immediately figure out that if you have a 1, 0, just by the next bit, you will immediately know whether you will have a B or a C, right? So within 3 bits, you'll be able to figure this. You don't need to wait for the after full length words or code words in order to figure out what was this, okay? So as you move here, if I encounter a 0, I know immediately it's an A, right? Then I encounter a 1, I have to wait, right? I encounter a 0, I still have to wait, right? I encounter a 0, that's it, I'm done within 3 bits, right? So I figure out this is C. I cannot wait for anything else. Because 1, 0, 0 will not appear anywhere else, right? As a prefix of anywhere else. So once I get 1, 0, 0, I instantaneously decode this to C.
I cannot find 1, 0, 0, 0, 1 يعني 1, 2, 0, 1.
لا هتلاقي مثلا انت بتدور على ايه؟ 1 0 0 وبعدين حاجتين بعد كده you will never find them. For 4 bits you will have 1 1 0 1 1 1 0 0. You will not have another letter. If you cannot do it without having this, you will have to move to 5. in this encoding method. Otherwise, it's not a prefix code. It has to be a prefix code. Tamam? Okay? So the three important properties: unique assignment, every word, every symbol is assigned a unique code word. Second thing is prefix code. No code word could be the prefix of any other code word, and from that we can get two important properties. Number one is unique decodability of any sequence, so no sequence can be represented by multiple decodable options, right? And the other option is instantaneous decoding. Instantaneous decoding means that you can recover every single code word into its original symbol within the duration of the given code word. So as soon as you figure out 100, immediately you can instantaneously decode, because it will not happen anymore in any other symbols, right? Or if you get 101, immediately it decodes into B. You don't have to wait further beyond that. Okay? Clear? Okay. So this describes the prefix free criteria that I mentioned. It's called prefix free. So no code word is a prefix of any other code word. Okay? And Huffman coding, which is the coding technique that we'll study as a source coding technique, is actually a prefix-free coding. And it is close to optimal in many cases. It actually achieves the optimal situation, okay? The optimal code, average number of bits per symbol, okay? So before going into describing the Huffman coding, we need just to understand what's the limit that I talked about, which is called the entropy. For any source, okay, if I know, and this is the guy, Shannon, who's the father of information theory, who came up with all these, like the basics of all these source coding, channel coding, and so on. He was at Bell Labs, and he was a graduate of MIT, then he got his PhD from Princeton University. And in his master's thesis, which is considered one of the most important, if not the most important master thesis in the area of electrical and computer engineering, he came up with the theory of digital design. So all these things that we study in digital design was done by this guy. And then in his PhD and his work in Bell Labs, he came with the theory of communication, which is called information theory. So it's just like cooking theories and then leaving them for people. And it took people like 20 years to actually figure out that his work is really that valuable. Okay. Anyways, so away from that, the entropy, the measure that you can use to measure the amount of information in a particular source, or in a particular source which is producing certain number of symbols, you have to understand that here, in this definition and in this course, since we are dealing with digital, we are assuming that our sources are discrete. So we have discrete alphabets that can come from the source. It can produce like either 1, 2, 3, or 4, for example, right? Or A, B, C, whatever, so discrete. And not only that, also your source is producing a finite set of alphabets. So it only had certain number of possible symbols that can come out of this. Then you need to encode those into the most compressed format, right? Which is the source coding technique. So in order to measure the amount of information contained in your source, you use a measure called the entropy. And the entropy is defined as the summation of the probability of the symbol number I multiplied by log to the base 2 of the probability of the symbol number I. So assuming that I have a source which is producing, for example, an alphabet consisting of, let's say, A, B, C, and D, right? Where A has a probability 0.1, B has a probability 0.3, C, for example, has a probability 0.5, and D must have a probability of 0.1 as well, right? Okay. So if I ask you what's the entropy of this source, you simply need to do this calculation. So you do summation from 1 up to 4, because I have only 4 possible symbols, right? And then will you use those? No, you are only going to use their probabilities, right? So the entropy only depends on not the values of the symbols, but the probabilities of the symbols, right? So these probabilities are going to be 0.1 times log to the base 2.1 plus 0.3 times log to the base 2.3 plus 0.5 times log to the base 2.5 plus 0.1 times log to the base 2.1, right? And don't forget the minus sign.
Why do you have a minus sign?
I will tell you why.
When
Okay?
number pi less than 1.
The PI
Yes, exactly, because it's 1 over PR. Okay. Now, why was the entropy, which is the measure of information, was defined this way, intuitively? There's a mathematical proof. If anyone wants to read more about this, you can go to a paper which is, I think it's 1948 in AT&T Technology Journal or something like that. It's called the Mathematical Theory of Communication. That's by Shannon. So you go into that paper, you will find why he defined the entropy, which is the average information produced from the source, this way. Okay? Now, that's mathematically. Now, intuitively, okay? How would you define the word information? How would you measure information? Intuitively. Okay? Assume that I tell you that today, okay, it's winter in Doha. Okay? Given the fact that you live in Doha, is this surprising to you?
Yes.
Today is winter in Doha. You know that winter comes in December, right? I didn't say today's cold. I said today's winter. Okay? I didn't say cold. Yeah, if it's cold, you will be surprised, right? Why this is not surprising, except for your case? Why this is not surprising? Because it's highly expected. I'm in Doha. It's December, right? So December is winter time. So almost the probability of this is equal to 1. That today is winter, right? So if something has a very high probability, the amount of information contained in it is almost zero because it's known to everyone. There's no information. Nothing is revealed, right? There was nothing that you didn't know and I revealed it to you. So this is something that you know, right? Vice versa, if I tell you that today the temperature is -3 in Doha, wow, this is a lot of information because it's very unlikely to happen, right?
The slow information.
Or no information?
Yes. And this is the last information.
Why?
Nothing to expect.
No, if something is not expected and I tell you that it happened, it means I'm giving you some information, right? But if something is very highly expected and I'm telling you it happened, okay, thank you, I already know. I already know. So think source and destination, right? If I know that the source is going to always send 1, 1, 1, 1, that's how the source is designed. Do I need any communication? No. I will just set as a destination and decode 1, 1, 1 without any communication because I know that this is what the source will do, right? But if the source sends 1 very rarely, I have to keep listening to the source until I figure out when it is sending a 1, right? In this case, sending a 1, which is a very rare event, something with low probability, is revealing information to me. Okay? That's why the information was taken to be something proportional to 1 over the probability. Because it's inversely proportional to the probability. Forget about the other part, okay? So the information pair symbol is inversely proportional to the probability of that symbol. If the symbol is highly probable, then receiving it is not much information for me, right? But if the symbol is very low probability, then receiving it is a good amount of information. Oh, something happened really, okay? Now, why do I take the log to the base 2? Because I want to convert things into bits. So log to the base 2 is going to give me number of bits, right? Okay, so it's log to the base 2, 1 over p, right? Now, if I want to do averaging of this, what do I have to do? Multiply each one of those information by its probability and sum. So this summation, multiply of the probability multiplied by the information, gives me the average information over all the alphabets, right? So you got the idea where does this entropy come from?
Yes.
Okay, and why the minus sign?
Yes.
Okay. Any questions on this? Can you calculate the entropy of a particular source if you know the probabilities of the different symbols? Yes, you can. Yes. طب كويس. What information is in this? This is zero information. Now go ahead.
He told me come at 3.
He told you come at 3?
Yeah.
You didn't tell him I have a lecture at 3?
Um,
No, because I wanted to do the final exam. Go ahead.
no, because he said it starts at 3:30, but
Okay, you will miss the most important part, but that's fine. Go ahead.
Capture some bits.
And I will upload the video for all of them. I'll restrict it to you. Okay, so now you know how to calculate the entropy of a source, which is now the fact that the entropy is the minimum amount of information that you need to send is something that requires a huge mathematical proof. It's doable, but it contains a lot of understanding of the information theory concepts, which we are not covering right now. So we will not look or just believe that this measure is a measure of the minimum amount of information that you need to send, or basically the minimum number of average bits per symbol you need to use to represent the information contained in this source. You cannot go below the entropy of the source. So if the entropy of the source is 2.3 bits, right? And someone tells you, oh, I found this source coding that can achieve 2 bits on the average, then tell you, sorry, you are a liar. Not for this source, you cannot. The minimum that you can do is 2.3, right? So don't tell me that you achieved something which is at 2. Unless you can tell me that the source coding theory is incorrect and there is something to fix it. And then you convince me that this is the case, okay? Otherwise, sorry, okay? You have a question, ask your question, and then I'll go to this question. Already answered. Already answered?
No. Could you elaborate just a little bit about why log2, like why that related to having it as one, as bits 1 and 0?
But if you okay, when you have any value and you want to convert that value into number of bits, what do you do? Log to the base 2. That's exactly. So we have a value, we want to convert this value into 2 to the power and then take that power. That power is going to be the number of bits used to represent the value. So, yeah, مش محتاجة elaboration. Okay. Any other questions?
For example, using a computer system that works on like trinary computer system, not binary.
And your question, why do I want to convert this into bits? Okay, I want to convert this into bits because all computations work in bits. Or our digital communication system is based on using bits. That's why I care about bits. But you can do it in any other basis system if you can actually use a different basis system. Yes. Any other questions? Right. We have been able to figure out the limit, right? So for any source, if you know the probabilities of the different symbols, you can easily figure out the entropy of that source, which is going to give you the minimum average number of bits per symbol that you can use to represent the data coming out of this source. You cannot do better than that. So your objective would be to find a source coding method that achieves that. If you achieve that, that's it. You don't need any other method, right? Given that your method is practical, doable, blah, 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 all these other practical considerations, right? Now, this is just an example how you can calculate the entropy of this source, right? So if you are told that A is repeated 4 times, B is repeated 5 times, C is 2, D is 1, and E is 1, then the probability of A becomes 4 divided by this summation, which is 4 over 13. The probability of B becomes 5 over 13. This is 2 over 13, 1 over 13, 1 over 13. And then you apply the rule. So H is equal to minus, and then probability of A times log to the base 2 probability of A plus probability of B times log to the base 2 probability of B, and so on. Get the numbers, you get eventually the entropy of this source, right? Okay?
If it is 2.3, you just take the ceiling like usual.
لا احنا بنتكلم على average bits per symbol. So why do you need to take the ceiling? It's not a fixed length coding.
Okay.
You can use variable length, and then the average can become the same number. صح? When you use variable length, the average number of bits per symbol will become a fraction. Correct? Okay. So now the Huffman method, the method designed by Huffman, such that you can convert a source into a very compressed format, in many cases the optimal compressed format, is discussed in this slide and the slide, a couple of slides after. Okay? So assume that you have a source which has certain messages, M1, M2, up to M6. Okay? And these are the probabilities of your messages. Okay? So here we show the probabilities of the messages, right? In this column. Okay? Now the first step is put your messages and their probabilities such that the probabilities are in طبعا هو هنا يعني
Descending order.
yeah, they should be in descending order. But the last two here are put in a not very correct descending order, right? So it should be actually 0.3, 0.25, 0.15, 0.12, 0.1, 0.08. Okay? Okay. Now the next step is come to the least two, okay? Gather, add them together, okay? And see what's the resultant of the addition, and then put that in the correct order among the other probabilities. So when you gather these, it becomes 18, 0.18, right? 0.18 comes after 0.25, but before 0.15. So the new ordering of probabilities is going to be 0.3, 0.25, 0.18, which is the sum of these two, right? Then 0.15, 0.12. Now, repeatedly do this. So go to the last two, group them together. You will get 0.27, right? So 0.27 comes after 0.3, so it becomes 0.3, 0.27, 0.25, 0.18, right? Similarly, one more step. Take the last two, gather them together, so they'll give you 0.43. 0.43 is the highest, so it comes the first, and then after that we have 0.3, and then we have 0.27, right? Correct? Okay. Last thing, do the gathering of the last two. Then you will end up with 0.57 and 0.43, and that's it. You stop at that stage when you have only two probabilities, right? Then you start assigning the bets going backward. So the one with higher probability gets a 0. The one with lower probability gets a 1, right? So here we have a 0, a 1, right? Then move one step back. The 1 goes with the 43, right? So this is here, correct? And then this 0 is assigned to 0.57, which is coming from these two. So the first left bet is the 0. Then the one with higher probability gets the second bet as 0. The one with lower probability gets the second bet as 1, right? Then move backward, okay? So these two, they don't come from anything else at the previous stage, so they go as they are with their bets, right? So these two goes here, becomes these two, same as they are, right? While the 0.43 came from 0.25 plus 0.18. So I take the 1, becomes the most bet, and then the higher probability gets a 0, the lower probability gets a 1 in the second bet, right? Then move previous step. In the previous step, this was broken into 2, right? So this, when it's broken into 2, the 0, 1, 0, 1 is the same thing, and then higher probability gets a 0 in the third digit, lower probability gets a 1, right? Then move one step. The one step before is the 18 broken into 0.8 and 0.10, right? So unfortunately, this is again out of order, so it should have been, let me correct it. So it should have been 1, 0, and this is 0, 8. Okay, so that's the correct way, okay? So the 0.18 came from these two, right? So I take the 1, 1, sorry. I take the 1, 1 as it is, and then assign to the higher probability 0 and the lower probability 1. Then this becomes the list of encoding for those messages. So M1 will take the code 00, right? M2 will take the code 10. M3 will take the code 010. M4 will take 011. M5 will take 110. And M6 will take 111. Now these are variable length. They are unique. Not a single message is taking the same code as the other. They are prefix free. None of them is prefix of the other one, right? So, and if you try as an exercise quickly before they kick us out, try to calculate the average number of bits per symbol in this encoded Huffman code, and tell me how it looks like. Okay, so how would you calculate the average?
I will take 0, I will add the probabilities for the 2 bits, multiplied by 2.
Yes.
Plus add the rest of the probabilities times.
Exactly. Or basically probability times length plus probability times length plus probability times length and so on. Okay?
2.45.
So you found it to be 2.45, right? Now, fine, done, خلاص. Now calculate H. So this is the expected value of X. ها؟ هو قال نفس الرقم فغالبا صح. هو قال نفس الرقم بتاعه. So what's H? How do you calculate H? Minus summation P log P. صح? PI log PI. So this probability times the log of this probability plus this probability times the log of itself plus this probability times the log of self and so on and so on, and then you add a minus sign at the end. So what's going to be the H? Must be less than or equal to 2.45, cannot be greater than, right? Anyone found it? ما عايزين حد يفيريفاي، مش عايزين واحد بس اللي يحسبها. So I want someone else to calculate it as well. So P log P, and then add the minus sign at the end, right? Or basically what you will get, invert, يعني reverse the sign. So P log P, P log P, P log P, add.
2.422.
Any other, so he said 2.422. Anyone got? يا جدعان مكسلين تحسبوا؟
لا هو لوك 2 لازم ناخد لها حاجات غريبة.
لوك 2 لازم تاخد لها حاجات غريبة.
لا لازم اخش في الاوبشن واجيب ملف وبعد كده لوك 2.
اوكي خلاص محدش ايه حد عايز يسأل حاجة؟ So anyways, what you will find is that the Huffman encoder was very close to the minimum limit, but in this case it was not equal to the minimum limit, right? And the other important thing, if for some reason you found that this is smaller than this, then know that you have done some mistake. Cannot be. The expected code length, the expected length pair symbol cannot be smaller than h of x. h of x is the minimum limit. So you cannot do something smaller than that, except if you did a fake code. So a code that is not neither unique nor prefix or whatever, right? A code that does not work in the first place, okay? And you thought that you have broken the barrier and you made, okay? So
if we have a point 2.5, 2.6 bits, we can't get the with this difference in the after the decimal make a difference in practical.
مش فاهم تاني.
If we have like 2.4, 2.6,
Okay.
2.7, anyway we need 3 bits.
لا يا جماعة, this is average. This is average. So it doesn't mean, actually we have been using integer number of bits, but the average per symbol became this. تمام? So this is an average number. It doesn't have to be an integer. In fixed length, it has to be, because the length of every single word is equal to this. تمام? But in variable, it's an average. خلاص? Any other questions? So
This method works for most cases, not all. It reaches the entropy.
yeah, so the case that we saw did not actually reach the entropy. It was close, but did not reach. تمام? So I want you to do, okay, this will tell you when you can approach actually the entropy. Okay? So I want you to do this example. Okay? I want you for the source encoded using the Huffman, the one that was in the previous slide. Okay? I want you and submit it. I will put this slide as an assignment, so you have to submit it. Okay? I want you to do this example. Design a fixed length code. So look at the messages, their probabilities, and figure out a fixed length code for them. Okay? Of course, doesn't matter the probabilities. If it's fixed length, then it depends only on the number of messages, right? Okay? And then from that fixed length, calculate the average bits per symbol. Okay? Then look at the source. Already we have done the case of variable length for every single message. Now imagine that you change your source such that you are not going to encode every message by itself. No. You are going to encode every two possible combination of messages, right? As one message coming from the source. So this means that your source can produce M1, M1, or M1, M2, صح? Or M1, M3, or M1, M4, all the way. وبعدين M2, M1, صح? Or M2, M2, and so on. تمام? How many possibilities?
36.
M to the power of M. Like the number of symbols to the power of the number of symbols.
اللي هي
So n to the power of n.
لا احنا عدد السيمبلز عندنا كانوا 6.
Okay, 6 to the power of 6.
6 to the power of
6.
لا 6 to the power of 2 يا جدع. ليه 6 to the power of 6 ليه؟ So it's 6 to the power of 2, right? Because you have 6 symbols and you are picking them 2 with repetitions. You can repeat the same symbol, right? And ordering matters. So M2, M1 is different from M1, M2.
It is permutation of 6 and 2. Yeah.
لا مش permutation. لأن permutation مش هتاخد فيها repetitions. ما ينفعش تقول M1, M1 في permutation. Okay? And in addition to this, M1, M2, M2, M1, it does take care of that, but doesn't take care of the fact that you can repeat the same symbol. Okay? So anyways, so this is 6 to the power 2. So your source will be producing 36 symbols, and each one of them will have a probability that you can calculate, right? M1, M1 هتبقى probability of M1 times the probability of M1. M1, M2 هتبقى probability of M1 times probability of M2, right? And so on, right? So you will have 36 possibilities with 36 probabilities, and perform the Huffman encoding for those. So you order them, you get them encoded. Tell me, when you do this, what's gonna be the average? Do you expect the average to increase or decrease? Now, can you tell me? And then do the exercise and see whether the average length is gonna increase or decrease. Don't forget that it's gonna be the average length per message. يعني لو اللينث اللي انت طلعت بيه هنا للمسج الواحدة اللي هي combination of two messages is going to be, for example, on average 8, يبقى هتقسمه على 2 لأنه it's 8 bits per 2 messages concatenated, صح؟ it becomes 4 bits per one message, تمام؟ And that average, tell me, when you do the exercise, tell me whether it will be closer to the entropy or further from the entropy. بمعنى larger than the one that we calculated for the case of encoding each message independently or separately, ولا it's gonna be smaller. يعني does it achieve more compression or less compression? خلاص؟
No, it's more like the bits per the long message.
Okay, so some of you says more, some of you says less. Let's leave it to when you solve the assignment and submit it. خلاص؟ شكرا.